go.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ayah, and today I will be presenting my project on open spaces in Auckland. The question I will be investigating will attempt to address Auckland's growing population and underutilization of its extensive park systems. The parks I will be mainly focusing on are the informal recreation and community zones. We can see that Auckland has an abundance of open green spaces. However, if we investigate deeper, it can be noted that the current park systems do not address diversity, distribution, and quality of open spaces and needs of the community according to the Auckland Council's long-term plan. Due to urban intensification, we must better meet the needs of the community and replace what will essentially be removed from their backyards. Due to the larger diversity in Auckland, Auckland is ethnically and culturally population. My aim is to create safer parks that will meet the needs of the community and allow public use throughout the day and night. My objective is to complete an in-depth analysis of the feasibility of 24-hour accessible parks within the Auckland region. This will be evident in my research base. This map shows the varying sizes of green spaces in Auckland. The functionality of them are all different. Some of them are sports fields, others are just grass, and some have playgrounds in them. I've driven around during the day and saw the different uses of these. So during the weekend especially, there's sports being played, club sports and all that. And also in the playground areas, there's always parents with their children playing in the playgrounds. However, at night, the majority of these end up in the same category, which is unused, because it's all dark and no one wants to go into dark space. Auckland is growing rapidly, and according to the Unitary plan, it has been projected to increase by 1 million over the next 30 years. It was also mentioned that Auckland's median age was 2 years younger than the national median, which supports the need to better the park system of Auckland. To the left is the legend for the Unitary plan. The dark orange, oh, you can't read it. The dark orange is the area of denser living. So if we have a look at this plan as an example, you can see that, is that one? So this area here used to be a light yellow, which was mixed housing suburban, and now it's becoming intensified to become mixed housing urban. And similar to this area, you can see it's becoming a lot more denser. The cost to maintain a park has decreased from $93,700 in 2010 to $76,300 in 2014 per 1,000 residents. Although it is good that the price has decreased due to better use of materials and planting, we are still not maximizing the use of the space. The opportunities here are great due to the fact that we have numerous empty parks which can be utilized and a rising population that will use these spaces. Photos of existing parks, such as this one in Lawn on D Street in Boston. This one popped up within 9 weeks, so there was not a lot of planning in it. It is, however, a temporary setup, and now they are looking at making it more permanent, not in the same location, but somewhere else. This place was a great success because it catered for a lot of different age groups, cultures, ethnicities, and it had seating, live band, and food available. It was also, although the live band and food spaces weren't open 24 hours, people were still using that place during the nighttime to just chill and relax with their friends. This park was based on a gym. So basically they built this gym for adults to use, and next to it there was a playground for their kids. So parents would bring their kids along. The kids can play in that playground while the adults go to the gym here. It's a good idea. However, at the same time, it's not usable at night. Pool lighting and the high trees around it doesn't provide for safe use. Another one is this once 10-story shoe company in St. Louis, Missouri, had been converted into an urban playground. The creative use of space and space around it made it functional during the day and night. So this one initially started off with building this playground from what was an abandoned place. And then later on, they decided to build a museum right next to it. And having that museum next to it, again, allowed for the diverse age groups and what people like to go and see. Through my research, I have noticed that the majority of parks around Oakland are basic and typical. Most playgrounds would have some of the following, such as skateboard parks, basketball courts, table tennis, gyms, picnic tables, and seating areas. However, most of them didn't have 2 or more of the above, and if they did, it was always far away from each other, that it didn't feel like it was a community. And that creates a separation between people's likes and creates a separation between the different types of people in Auckland. So looking at the unitary plan, they had separated open space into 5 categories: conservation, informal recreation, sports and active recreation, civic spaces, and community zones. I will be using this as a guide for my project and figure out which, if any, category my design will fall into. Currently, I'm looking at doing the informal recreation and community zones, and adding the sports and activity recreation if the land is big enough to accommodate for that. To the right is the Auckland's checklist for parks. It shows what's essential, what should be considered, and what is discouraged. I will also be using this as a guide for when I design my area. The chart to the left shows the different benefits of caring for the different topics, such as the cultural, educational, sports, and health benefits. The city of Boulder Park asked teens what features they would want to see in parks, and the following 10 were the top that the teens have answered to, and obviously Wi-Fi was the top one. So I will also be taking this into account and using as much of this as possible. So for example, water feature might not be able to be used in all the parks, but incorporating as many of this as possible will be very beneficial. And throughout the research, I've also found that the main reason that a lot of parks had failed was because of lack of places to sit, gathering points. The entrance and visual inaccessibility as well was a big factor. The blank walls and dead spaces, where they sort of, when they build something, they don't take into account the other spaces around it, and it creates dead spaces. CEPTED, which is the crime prevention through environmental design. This will be my main reference, as making sure that parks are safe is the most important step to allow people to want to go to a place. There are 4 points that they have pointed out that need to be thought of when designing for parks or any area: surveillance, territorial reinforcement, quality of environment, and access management. Again, I will take this into consideration for my design and make sure that safety is number 1. They've also listed 8 qualities of safer places. So access, surveillance and sighting, see and be seen, which is basically creating an openness between the park and the street or the residents around it. The layout, sense of ownership, quality of environment, physical protection, social and cultural recognition. When I was searching for location, I wanted it to be around the intensification area. So I've found these 4 locations which were different in the sense of what's around it. So some of them had water surrounding it, others had different types of zoning, and some of them were in the middle of the intensification area. So out of the 4, I've chosen to pick location number 2, Mason Park in New Lynn. For a few reasons. One, because it had a train station next to it, which would be interesting to try and design something around that. Another one is that it's sort of surrounded by housing already, so it'll be a good challenge to see how that would work out. So that's the park. It already has tennis courts, but those ones are for the club. And this area here is just a black-green grass area. There's a path that people use to kind of cut through the road, but not a lot of activity happens there.
Excuse me, I don't know where that is. Can you show us the map before and tell us where the mall is?
I don't have a zoom. So that's Fruitvale train station?
Which one?
Fruitvale train station?
Fruitvale.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where's Newland?
So
It'll be.
Where's the centre?
It'll be down there somewhere.
What's the main road?
Yeah, yeah.
What's the main road going through?
So there's Fruitvale here.
Great North Road.
There's Great North Road here.
Great North Road
Yeah.
here.
So
And the main junction.
Is it Newland?
To the right, yeah.
Or here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's to the left?
Is that the Titirangi Road? Just there's a big junction just slightly to your right. To
This
your
one?
Right.
To my right, yeah.
Yeah. Is that a major junction there?
Yeah, that one there is, what is it called?
This is Titirangi Road.
Did
Is
you
it
rent it out?
Titirangi?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so that's Titirangi, so it's just
So you
Great
go-
North Road,
so you
just
go-
going up the hill.
You go under that, that's where the railway bridge is.
Yeah.
It's going on to the west coast road.
Yeah.
It's really, it's sort of almost halfway between Newland and into Gleneen.
Yeah. So another map, next time.
Yep. So Mason's Park is 7,248 square meters. So it's a big piece of land. Most of it is already it's already got the tennis courts on it. And I will try to incorporate my design to work with the what's already existing there, rather than demolish everything and start new. I've got maps of the contours and services. Both of these will come in handy when designing the area. Knowing where the land falls and where the services are is going to be beneficial. That's a photo of Mason Park in the afternoon, and it's empty. There are cars there, but all these are for the clubs in the tennis court. My approach to methodology will utilize the current Auckland Design Manual in conjunction with the Unitary Plan once it becomes active and resources are made available both online and in print. I will look at how other countries have addressed this issue for a culturally diverse park system and how it can be adapted for Auckland. Some ideas I've found that I'd like to incorporate, not necessarily these exact ones, but just the idea of them, such as unique seating areas, some form of heat, doesn't have to be fire, but that will be unique, I think, and if it somehow can be controlled by an outside source. Shelter and seating area are the number one that has to be available. Everything would need to be hard-wearing and of low maintenance to keep the cost of running these parks down. So back to the question, with the expected increase in population, how can we make better use of Auckland's extensive park systems? I can conclude that Auckland has an abundance of open spaces and the need to utilize this is becoming critical due to the proposed intensification of Auckland's region. I will design a park that will incorporate the points I sourced in my findings and create a space that will allow people to use this at any time of the day. More parks isn't necessarily better. Better use of parks is what we're looking out for. Thank you.
I guess my first question is around the actual site that you've chosen. You've described, the unitary plan and the different coding, and I think it's important to understand, for us to understand what's at the boundaries, for you to understand what's at the boundaries of the site, what is currently there and is it suburbia, and what is going to be there. So at the moment, I don't know. Is it going to be intensified?
She showed that.
She showed that, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Let's go back to the...
Yeah, no, it was a good selection based on the most intensification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the part that
There.
I kind of remember the most on your
Yeah.
presentation.
Yeah, so this is now,
Yeah.
it was this.
Yeah.
It's changed
And
to
now it's
orange colour, so
intensifying.
it can now be terraces and apartments.
Yeah, okay, so I'm extending that to, I assumed that it was going to be intensified, and that makes it clear. How are you going to show that engagement? Like, is this project just about the park site, or is it about the surrounding building?
Yeah.
Like, is the design actually about that relationship between the housing, the type, and what's happening in there? I'm just thinking about, you know, a key idea is the safer parks and the kind of qualities. One of my first questions, is this a lighting project, for example? You know, what are the mechanisms that are going to make this safer, or is it about those neighbouring, the new neighbours, or, you know, what's the existing neighbours, the analysis of that?
Like crudely, would you design the panels with windows that looked on the parks?
Well, yeah, to what extent is that relationship part of this project?
Yeah. Or is it just, so you were saying, or is it just going to be just but it's a landscape project and whatever the builder builds, that's fine.
Yeah, how does that relationship show? Yeah.
Well, at the moment, I think it's it's going to be a mixture of lightings. For safety, it'll be lighting and the surrounding neighbourhood integrated together. But I guess the more I go into it, the more clear it becomes which way.
You could write a thesis on lighting in parks.
Yeah. Actually,
There's huge controversy because a lot of people call for lighting, but the analysis is that doesn't necessarily make it safer at all. And in fact, we at one park in Mount Eden, we did a big consultation, and exactly 50-50.
No.
50 wanted lighting and 50 didn't. And the compromise we got to is the lights would be put in, but it would be turned off at 11 o'clock at night in the middle of summer and an hour after dusk in the middle of winter to allow.
Yes.
that is the interesting thing. I mean, you are talking about the night use of a park. We have the space there, and night use of a park. First of all, I think you need to define what is night in New Zealand. Okay? New Zealand, 6 o'clock news or 7 o'clock news. You know, Spain, 11 o'clock at night news. So you need to define what is night in New Zealand. I think the project is on what you were saying, like, can a night park work in Auckland? Can you design a park 24/7? And what are the key factors to make up a night park? I mean, people are used to kind of temporary takers of a park. There is a fantastic show, which unfortunately they have stopped doing, in Western Park in Ponsonby.
No, it wasn't. They didn't stop doing.
Okay, they ran out of money.
No. What actually happened is that the local board funded that night Art in the Dark, and it was actually the students that did it were had just come out of Elam Pine Arts School essentially, and it was their project. I think they did during their degree.
They graduated.
And but then it became an economic proposition for them. Yeah. But there was a number of factors, including the local board had initially put seed funding in, and then it had less funding in. Although then AT actually did decide to fund it, but then the main woman got involved with Oliver Driver, and she's now pregnant, and so different things happen. And of course, the park's now all been done up. So even if they'd wanted to keep it going, it's sort of been out of action because it's been done up. They actually did a project for us in Bellevue Park in Mount Eden. It cost us an awful lot of money. It rained, no one came. Yeah. So there's a whole heap of factors that cause them to succeed or not.
So Ayah's supervisor is Nikolai. So Nikolai is kind of like from Bulgaria, so you're the park for a drink.
Wow.
I've looked into that.
What are the bylaws?
You're not allowed.
But the other thing,
No, they're all alcohol free. Most of them.
Alcohol
So
bad, you know.
I think it has to do with defining what is that kind of night use
So
of public space in Auckland.
So carols by candlelight?
Well, I don't
Wow.
know.
Once a year?
Once a year we go to the park at night with the kids and
Yeah.
we sing carols.
The other thing too is, I mean, it's sort of coming back to Art in the Dark, which is the driver, the event kind of mode. Is the project about the nature of events and how they're held, like the activation of a lot of these spaces is something to do with who's actually driving the project to activate them, and sometimes those sort of pop-up sort of type things actually eventually build enough strength to become more established. And is there an identity in this particular location that has some grassroots kind of establishment? There's a point of difference to other parks that other parks can maybe key off the sort of like the idea of what makes this one work.
And just from your photos, that first photo you showed of some place in Boston, which looks really interesting. In fact, they did those same sort of lights and things down at behind Britomart in the Britomart quarter when basically the council had bought all the land, but the buildings hadn't all gone up, and it was really an attractor to bring down. Also, there's a whole lot of playgrounds down by Silo Park now. Again, that's an attractor, but in 10 years, it's going to be apartments everywhere in that area. So they're bringing people into a new. I guess the question, I don't know this area at all. And the question is whether or not it's ready for something like that. Certainly in terms of lights, residents are crazy. I mean, you know, they don't like people playing in parks at night. They consider it their park, and they would be horrified and they would fight against it. You get a whole group of residents fighting against this, even though you think it's absolutely wonderful. That's the reality, because they only like people playing in them in daylight hours. They don't like people coming at night. So the night parks normally only work if they maybe are in a town centre where there's a lot of other things and noise coming. Some public land in a town centre would be perfect. And of course in Avondale, I don't know how much public land's there, but that's where a whole heap of development's going to occur in Avondale, and it's whether or not there's some public land, parkland in that area where something like that could work.
I think your proposition is a railway station.
Yeah.
There's these sort of crappy suburban houses.
Yeah.
Some developer's going to buy some of them. They're going to build these apartments, probably quite cheap. So you're going to get young people,
kids,
got a job in town.
Yeah.
They catch a train. They walk across this park to their apartment.
Yeah.
So maybe that's going to actually change the kind of social dynamic.
So some of the other ideas are good. Some of the other ideas are really good. You know, the movies and what have you. But again, they're expensive. They're run by a regional group. Food trucks are a good idea, but we say no to any food truck that wants to go into parks in our area. And the reason we say no is that no, not the rubbish at all. It's something you've probably never thought of, which is that often the shops nearby. And so they complain. They're saying you're giving that person a place to sell for a relatively small amount of money. We're trying to make a go of our business. You're taking away our business. So it's because of the local businesses that are unhappy about that. So those are the sort of factors that you probably wouldn't even thought of, but that's the reality factors.
You know what is your project is? Have you been in the night markets?
Yes.
If you put your park next to a night market, then you have all these people, all this legality, and probably the correct combination of type of people, which they are there eating at night, already enjoying a space at night. Like if I have to get out of my house in the suburbs to go to a park at night, ain't going to happen. But if I'm used to, because I'm a foreigner or for whatever it is the reason, or I'm there with my family eating
someone told you there's some great food at this market.
You know, like if it is on walking distance of that night market, automatically you got everyone there, which is ready to do the activity that you propose. Otherwise you get in the fight with the nice old lady that is trying to sleep or watching the news.
having said that, I think the faux local board would be love to hear when you finally finish your project. They'd love to hear that. It'll be a matter of having enough money to actually do up that park. It looks like it's been a neglected park. The other thing I wonder whether it's actually on the boundary between two different areas, and often parks on boundaries between two different areas that make it really hard because neither wants to invest the money because the people on the other side will get the benefit, but sometimes two different boards go together and help fund it, but that's difficult depending on whether they're in agreement or not. So I mean, I think that there's some good ideas, and some can be rejected, some can be embraced, and to make a focus on a not very well loved park is wonderful.
It was great. I just wonder.
We have a better site.
Yeah.
No, liquor land in Ponsonby Road. Okay.
That's more urban.
No,
That's more
somebody
urban.
want to convert. You know where liquor land is in Ponsonby Road?
Where it is?
Yeah.
No.
Anyway, middle of Ponsonby Road, that is this.
Doesn't go? No.
But that has its own controversies.
Yes, I'm sure.
However, it's a perfect experiment. It's
Yeah.
perfect experiment
Yeah.
because it's, at the moment there is a grocer there, the council own the land. The residents want to demolish the building and do a park in Ponsonby Road. If you cannot make work a park 24/7 in Ponsonby Road, you cannot make it work
Anyway.
anywhere.
Yes, I
Plenty
bought,
of money.
I voted to buy that land way back. It was over 10 years ago that that land was bought. But no, I think
So are you against the park? Or
no,
favour of the park?
that's not the issue. The issue is that it's butted up against residential one land, okay, which is, you know, villas and what have you.
Yeah.
But the reality is that there's no money for the park to great ideas. There's no, unless some of the land is retained for shops. Now, if some of the land is retained for shops, they can build the park tomorrow. But all of the residents don't want any shops there.
Yeah.
So it'll take 10 years for the money to come for the park. So those are the dilemmas.
So I'll
of
fund
that.
them today.
But
I think this one's more interesting.
yes, I think this is more
Yeah.
interesting.
Suburbia.
This is actually typical of what's
Yeah.
going to happen in a number of
Yeah.
places, and so getting a
Yeah.
model that
Yeah.
works would be really
It's
nice.
a great example, and the reality is that that there probably won't be any funding for this dreadful old park next to the railway station, despite the fact that all these people are going to be coming there over the next 5 to 10 years. So giving some visual inspiration would just be wonderful.
Really connecting into something.
I think it would be interesting to follow through on, like I've sort of underlined ownership in one of those sort of areas that you were talking about examples, and it seems to me that communicating with the people in the local area and actually getting a better understanding of the immediate vicinity of what they're interested in, and looking at the pop-up possibilities and sort of treating it as a sort of a laboratory, an experimental laboratory to explore some ideas that might be able to be applied with, you know, the example you had of the lighting, you know, temporary example would be really interesting, and also just to see what kind of event type basis that they might be willing to engage with.
There's a good book, programming the urban surface, and it's essentially about event urbanism. How do you make event urbanism, and you know, what are the different strategies for doing it? So that's good. But I think this idea about firstly checking into what are sort of vernacular night events that happen in parks and Auckland and New Zealand.
Yeah.
And you know, it does happen.
Yes, they do.
It costs $30,000 for 2 nights in Bellevue Park to have not very much on it for art in the dark.
Yeah. And for carols and candlelight, nothing.
That is $20,000 it costs for that event in Potters Park, and we've actually taken the candles away, so they have to now buy a sort of that's what it costs, because you have to have a stage to, you know, so events, no event, and a movie in a park, $10,000 for a movie in a park, and that's subsidised.
Yeah.
So nothing's cheap, which is why it only normally happens.
So those are just ideas.
But then again, you know,
That's what's
this
available.
flash mob in a park is free.
But
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
you know, you just
so,
need
so what's
whatever.
free?
Flash mob.
Flash-
Like, you know, when you send text
Oh.
and everyone
We're all meeting.
turns
Yeah,
up.
yeah, and I was just thinking about Pokemon Go, and that's actually getting people running around, involving themselves in spaces, and and it's sort of
Yeah.
extension of that is what are the, like looking at, you know, where there are costs to do some types of activities, looking at where are the free opportunities or low cost opportunities
it's not
could be
free.
another. I know it's maybe not free really, but you know, what are the, you know, opportunities to recycle or reclaim or you know, do those types of things.
And what about the tennis courts? Do you think?
Well, again, it
Can you
depends.
leave them, or-
Well, again, it depends where the tennis,
own them?
well, the council will probably own them. There aren't many non-council tennis courts, but the tennis club. But I mean, we've got a situation in a park called Anderson Park, which is just across from Pack and Save, where there are 3 90-year-olds that have a tennis club there. They've got their own building. It's council land, council building. And I met with them last year to try to, well, I've been meeting them for over 10 years, trying to get them to rejuvenate, go to the school, get people interested. They've been on the front of the paper saying the council's trying to take our tennis club away. But they're 3, they said, look, if people want to come on a Tuesday morning between 10 and 12, they can join our club. So they are monopolising 2 tennis courts and a clubhouse on Anderson Park, 3 90-year-olds. Wow. Are you against seniors being active? You can see it all. So I mean, so I don't know how active that is. Bowling clubs, we're in the same space with bowling clubs. And so if that was part of it, that would be really good. Do they need the 3 courts? Could they just use 1? Can there be if it's a declining membership, could they go somewhere else? Those are the issues.
For basketball courts.
Yeah,
They
just-
can, but they're not always. Again, the tennis courts in Anderson Park aren't basketball courts, so that's one of the things I'm trying to do is make them netball.
So we could not to ignore it, I guess, just to think about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And get in contact with them, find out what's happening.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the more
Yeah.
stuff that's on the park, the better it is.
Yeah.
People will actually come to it, I guess.
I think your project is sitting in a completely wrong paradigm. What urban parks are about in the 21st century. Are you familiar with the concept of green infrastructure?
Am I familiar with
You
it?
might have, yeah.
Um,
Have you heard about it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably, yeah.
I'm
The
just
correct
wondering where
answer
the
is
picture
yes.
going.
You don't have to know much about it, but I'm
Okay.
sure you've heard of it.
Yeah.
I don't think we can afford to make urban parks, to maintain urban parks in the 21st century as a playground. Your entire project is hopelessly anthropocentrically focused. It's all about what people need to play in their free time and stuff like that. First of all, I'm very cynical about how much they use parks these days. If you haven't noticed, people are in cars on the motorway, people are in shopping malls, they're on Facebook, and they're in classrooms like this. They like to talk about the need for green space, but then they don't use it. So from the user perspective, actually, the whole purpose of parks is under question. You have framed your project inside the Auckland plan. Yes, intensification will bring about problems about green open space, but it's more about green infrastructure, issues of stormwater, habitat conservation and stuff like that, rather than playgrounds for people, I think. I think you need to revisit the whole purpose of urban parks in the 21st century. In the era of climate change, we need to think about parks as working landscapes. They have to do things for us 24/7 rather than us just going there to play tennis. I'll give you an example of a list that covers a much wider brief than what you have. For example, an urban park could do stormwater management, climate moderation, habitat protection, public recreation, which you have mentioned, visual amenity, food and fiber production, waste recycling, energy generation, environmental education. This is 9 things. You have covered only 1 or 2.
Actually, that is good, because with this intensification means all those little gardens,
They're going.
Food production.
they've all
Yeah.
gone, and so there's all this impervious surface, there's much more runoff.
That brings local
The
kids
valley.
in.
So the problems that intensification will cause are way bigger. It's a bigger list of issues that intensification raises. It's not just people in playgrounds. So I would urge you to reconsider the whole. Actually, can we go back to your research question? You have basically already trying to answer the question, and you're basically saying that one. Yeah. How can we make better use of? You are assuming better use for people to play. I'm telling you, that's only 1/4 of the problem. 3/4 is the green infrastructure stuff. If you don't address that, I think you will not properly address this assignment.
If you go to Owaraka Park, you'll see that our local board's got the Owaraka School involved in planting plants and food and what have you. The school actually looks after it, and their park again with schools, with intensification, more classrooms are going on to schools, they're less able to do the things that they used to be able to do. So in many ways I think parks will be used more, and certainly in this area a lot of sports parks, kids are still playing sports. There are still a lot of sports parks.
I think if they're not playing, they should be playing. That's my side.
But one of the issues for us is that to properly, at the moment, sports parks, our sports field, it's only 10 hours a week that they can play on because of the soil break, especially at winter time. You can make it a 40-hour a week, but it costs a lot of money. But then basically it's not a park, it's really a sports field as opposed to a park, because it has to be fenced off so that dogs can't wee in it and what have you. So that's the big issue at the moment, is if you're actually going to make the spaces you've got for sports more playable, it sort of almost makes it a sort of an industrial type. And of course that's the big issue at Felds Park at the moment, which they're taking the board to the Environment Court on, because we're trying to
all weather surface.
all weather surface.
So probably there are better sites for your project than the little Mason
Well, no,
Park.
I think all the opposite of this is she's doing an audit of all the parks around.
As an example of
Masons,
all of the little
and
parks.
then just say, well, this area would be good. We can keep this area as good for sport. This area over here is going to be good for connecting to something else, and then so your park becomes part of a matrix of both public use, sports, all these other things, but it's also a matrix of environmental use. So we're I don't know, a mile from a bush reserve, or we're on an overland flow path, or just needs to kind of situate it. You just need to situate your park not just in a kind of unitary plan, but in all these other layers of uses. So I think you're quite right, Joe.
We have to correct that imbalance. We now think in terms of parks as mainly for human use, for recreation. It should be, in my view, secondary purpose. Actually, the primary purpose is green infrastructure.
And it's probably a boggy area, I don't know.
Boggy.
Well, if the parks aren't used very lot, usually there's drainage problems. That's why there's no swings and slides and things on it, because there's drainage problems.
And but that's also another interesting issue, is that I know parks people are getting really grumpy with roads and stuff, because their parks are being turned into wetlands.
We need
we need wetlands. What's the park here? We'll put it there. And they go, what about this use? What about that use? So.
But also you've used those statistics, which I found interesting, of how the money for parks is going down because they're doing things better. No. They're cutting costs. So if the toilet seat breaks in a toilet in a park, they don't replace it anymore. So that before, if they used to put non-poisons in the playground to kill the weeds, they're putting poisons now down. So in Auckland City, they used to use hot water sort of techniques. They've all gone with the super city because they're using Roundup again. So in fact, it's not necessarily a good thing, in my estimation. They used to have nice flower gardens. No flower gardens anymore. So they used to mow the lawn more frequently. No, they're mowing it less frequently now. They're not taking the weeds out so that it's hard for kids to play on and they get stung by bees. So there's all these issues as to why, beyond the effect of what happens.
That's great. Yeah, so that's really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Really good viewpoint, and very practical ways to move forward. So thanks very much.